In this tutorial, I am going to show you how to actually use field driver inside a real After Effects composition. This is not just a quick feature list. I want to show you the normal working process, explain what each section does, and help you understand how to get useful results fast. Before we start clicking buttons, let me quickly explain the panel layout. At the top, we have controller setup. This is where you create the driving system for the animation. That can be either controller layers or a path controller, and this section also includes utility tools like create grid and fix anchor. Next to that is the mode section. This tells field driver how it should calculate distance. In other words, should the layers react to controller objects in the comp, or should they react to a drawn path? Below that is target properties. This is one of the most important areas in the script, because this is where you choose exactly what should respond. Position, scale, opacity, color, rotation, look at behavior, time remapping, and so on. Then we have custom effects. This is a very powerful feature because it lets you use proximity not only on built-in transform properties, but also on almost any effect property that you load from the controller. And finally, we have the execution section. This is where you apply the setup, bake expressions into keyframes, remove expressions, or fully reset the selected layers. So if you remember just one thing from the layout, remember this. Top area creates the system. Middle area defines the response. Bottom area executes the setup. Let us start with the most common setup, which is null controllers. I can choose how many controllers I want here, then click Gen Controls. Field driver creates the control layers automatically, and each controller already comes with the sliders needed to drive the animation. It also gives me a visible radius guide in the comp, which makes it very easy to understand the influence area. This is the setup you will probably use most of the time if you want point-based interaction. It is fast, visual, and easy to control. So if your layers should react to a moving point in the comp, start here. If you want the animation to react to a line instead of a point, use Create Path Controller. This creates the path underscore control layer. Then the next step is to draw your path with the pen tool. Then select all layer and hit apply and save. The most important thing here is that field driver needs a real readable Bezier path. So if your path setup is not reacting, the first thing to check is whether the path is actually readable and not just a default parametric shape. If it parametric shape, then go to path controller layer, contents your shape, right click on it and click convert to Bezier path. Then select layer and hit apply. Path mode is great when you want motion to flow along a route instead of reacting to a point. Now let us look at mode. This tells the script which controller logic to use. If you created null controllers, stay in nulls mode. If you created a path controller, switch to path mode. This sounds very basic, but it is one of the most important checks in the whole workflow. If the mode does not match the controller type, apply will not work correctly. Now we get to the main workflow, and this is really the part you need to remember. First, create the controller. Second, select the layers you want to affect. Third, choose the properties you want to drive. Fourth, click apply and save. That is the core field driver workflow. So for this example, I will select my grid layers, enable position, scale, and color, and click apply and save. Once I do that, the setup is active. From that point, I usually stop touching the target layers and start controlling the result from the controller. That is what makes the script fast. You build the connection once, and then you art direct the motion from one place. The target properties are easy to understand once you think of them as response options. Position makes layers move based on proximity. Scale makes them grow or shrink. Opacity fades them in or out. Color affects the color response. Rotation Z adds to derotation. To LookAt makes layers face toward or away from the controller. The 3D options are for 3D layer setups. And time remap lets proximity affect playback timing, which is useful for footage and precomps. The important thing here is that you do not need to turn on everything. In most cases, the best result comes from choosing only the properties you actually need. The real power of field driver happens after you hit apply. At this point, you can stop looking at the script panel entirely. All your art direction happens right here in the controller's effect controls. Radius controls how far the influence reaches, and fall-off softens the edge. Attract and repel control the direction and force of the movement. Just use a negative value if you want to invert the reaction entirely. Same for other properties too. For more advanced motion, elasticity instantly adds bouncy, physics-based reactions, while sticky mode forces layers to stay triggered even after the controller moves away. Finally, if you're working in a massive comp, the render range slider keeps playback fast by only calculating nearby layers. You shape everything right here, in real time. Now let us look at Custom FX, because this is one of the strongest features in the script. Custom FX lets you use proximity on almost any effect property, not just the built-in transform options. So this is where you can use things like glow, Gaussian blur, deep glow, or other effect controls. The order matters here. First, add the effect you want to use on the controller. Then in the timeline, open the controller, open effects, open that effect, and select the exact property you want. For example, glow intensity, then click select property in one of the custom FX slots. After that, set the controller property to the default value you want, like 0. Then select your target layers, enable the custom FX slot, and click apply and save. Now that controller effect property becomes your proximity control source. So when I change glow intensity on the controller, I am controlling that effect through the field system. The one rule you really need to remember is this. Select the single property, not the whole effect group. There are also two useful utility tools here. Create Grid helps you build a layout quickly, which is great for testing or for pattern-based setups. Fix Anchor helps correct anchor points before applying the setup. This is useful because wrong anchor placement can make scale, rotation, and LookAt behavior feel off. At the bottom, we have the finishing tools. Bake Keys converts the live expression setup into keyframes, which is useful when the motion is final, or when you want smoother playback. Wipe Expressions removes the live field driver expressions. Wipe Keys and Reset removes the setup more completely and restores the layer state where possible. So the simple rule is this. Apply while building, bake when you are finished, and reset when you want to start clean again. So that is the full field driver workflow. Before we finish, there is one last thing you should know. Field driver actually has several hidden features built right into the buttons. If you hover over any button in the panel, a tooltip will pop up. This not only tells you exactly what the button does, but it also reveals hidden CTRL and Alt modifier shortcuts for advanced commands. I highly recommend hovering over the buttons and trying them out. And that is the full field driver workflow. The script is designed to handle the complex math so you can focus entirely on your design. Thanks for watching, and enjoy using Field Driver.